Schwarzbacher.
Here.
Commissioner Almond.
Here.
Commissioner Bolt.
Here.
Commissioner Coronado.
Here.
Commissioner Miller.
Here.
Commissioner Reynolds.
Here.
Commissioner Stallman.
Here.
We have a full house tonight. Next item on agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, you all have the agenda, had a chance to look at it. Are there any changes, corrections, deletions, change of order? Seeing none, compliant crowd here. We'll next go to motion for continuance. Planning Commission is to consider a procedural motion to continue the public hearing regarding a proposed Second Amendment Santa Fe Park Plan Development Plan, otherwise known as River Park, to November 11th, 2019. There will be no testimony taken on this item this evening. Do we have a motion for continuance?
I move we continue the public hearing regarding a proposed Second Amendment to Santa Fe Park Plan Development Plan, River Park, to November 11th, 2019.
Have a second?
Second.
Any comment? Please vote.
The vote is 7 in favor. The motion carries unanimously.
Okay, we'll let that one pass.
And Commissioners, we will re-notify that case prior to the November 11th and resend notifications.
Okay. All right, next up is minutes to be approved. Our last meeting quite a while ago, April 22nd, 2019. You all vividly remember the meeting. Do we have a motion for approval, or we have corrections, deletions?
I was going to ask one question. You've got me down as vice chair, but I believe Commissioner Schwarzbacher was the vice chair at that point in time, because we did that in early April, I thought.
It may have been at the meeting that we voted. I can go in and correct that.
She was here for that, but
Okay,
I did miss this one.
yeah,
I can go in and correct that.
okay, just for clarity.
Thank you.
With that clarification, anything else? I'll entertain a motion.
I move to approve based on the recording secretary's certification, the April 22nd, 2019 action minutes of the Littleton Planning Commission.
Second.
Okay, any comment? Please vote. And you're abstaining, you were not at the
I was
meeting?
not there.
Anybody else that wasn't at the meeting? Okay.
The vote is 6 in favor. The motion carries.
Okay. Next item up is public comment. This is your chance to speak on items not on tonight's agenda. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. When you have 30 seconds left, our recording secretary will hold up the yellow card. When your 3 minutes is up, she'll hold up the red card. Please give your name, address, or your district number. We expect the conversation to be civil. We do have a sign-up sheet.
Let's wait to see who's ahead.
Get your $10 out. Okay, thank you. We have one speaker and actually one person in the audience. Pam Chadbourne, please.
Good evening, Planning Commission. My name is Pam Chadbourne. I live a block and a half from here. So I'm going to say that I think the future land use map is not ready for prime time and needs to be pulled from the comprehensive plan. I have problems with the comprehensive plan too. It hasn't been adequately shown to the people. The people do not have adequate information to evaluate it, much less enough time. But the future land use map is, I believe, a giveaway to developers in certain sections of the city. It's against the best interests of the people who live in those areas now. And they have not been properly informed of what these changes will do to their neighborhoods, nor have they had the chance to react to that.
We have our screen on? Here?
So a couple of comments about, I think I've talked about process. So there's...
Second. Get this on screen. There we go. Go ahead. Sorry.
There's not been enough time for citizens to look at that. And ironically, or bizarrely, the financial results aren't even available until after public comment closes. Just pause a minute, because that is a fundamental violation of our right to understand the fiscal impacts of this plan. This process is wrong, and specifically for the changes for the new core neighborhood in this mixed-use area. Actually, this is my April one. I brought up the wrong one. But the areas in the north, it's still these guys in this area. They deserve a right to know what's going on. Now, these are people who, many of them are renters. They are dependent on their housing. Somebody looked at this and said, I don't like the way it looks. There was something called A Tale of Two Littletons several years ago, and I found it. I got a copy. For me, it is a horrible bias in terms of I want it to look a certain way, but it has no merit in terms of providing housing for the people who are here. Yet, the new future land use map is just a reflection of that bias in current form. It needs to be withdrawn until these folks have a chance to see, have it explained to them what this would do, and have a chance to weigh in. Let me also mention a number of things. Climate change, we had a heat wave in France, which killed over 1,000 people. They had another one. Europe doesn't have air conditioning. Tokyo, Japan had a heat wave. Greenland is melting, and yet where is climate change and the response to it in Littleton? We know that municipalities are key to reacting to that. Where is that in here? Nowhere. Energy efficiency, particularly in new building, should be paramount, and it's not here. The housing is not here too. I have a number of other things that I could go on and on about. Withdraw the future land use map from this comp plan. Thanks.
Thank you. Since no one else is in the audience, we'll go on to the next item, which is general business. We have none. Item 7, we have our one public hearing tonight. That is PC Resolution 09-2019, recommending approval of an ordinance to amend the Littleton City Code, Title 10, Chapter 1, to establish enabling legislation and procedures for the creation, adoption, and amendment of a comprehensive plan. Could we please have a staff report? Speak into the microphone closely.
Thank you, Chairman Rudnicki and members of the Planning Commission. I'll have a brief presentation. Right now, the Littleton City Code defines the comprehensive plan, but doesn't have any policies or any direction on how it's created, how it's adopted, or how it's revised. The proposed amendment before you tonight establishes council's responsibilities in creating or amending the comprehensive plan in whole or in part. It also, subsection C of the proposed legislation, creates a public hearing process where at least one public hearing is required for any comprehensive plan amendment or adoption whatsoever by Planning Commission. They would make a recommendation to City Council, and then by resolution, Council would have at least one public hearing and make a final decision on any comprehensive plan, addition to the comprehensive plan, revision, or amendment. Property owners may request amendments to the character and land use map under provision D of the proposed legislation, and that's independent of council, or if there's a citizen that requests a change to that specific part of the comprehensive plan, they have the ability to request that change. Those would be done through the procedures for adoption in subsection C. of that proposed legislation. We did have a couple of questions that came in today regarding the proposed legislation, and those questions and responses were distributed to you tonight, both by email and in writing or in paper form. Staff recommends approval of PC Resolution 09-2019. The Planning Commission options are to approve it with conditions, adopt a resolution recommending denial, or continue to a date certain. Thank you.
Questions of staff? Dan, we'll start with you.
No, I guess my question would be that the questions that came in from commission today, is the public aware of that, or do we need to review what those questions were and the response?
They haven't been added to the public record yet, but they will be tomorrow because they didn't come in time for me to get them in the packet.
Okay.
And Commissioner Miller, I'm happy to summarize those if you'd like.
Why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, just
Certainly.
Yeah.
We had a question from Chairman Rudnicki concerning how amendments to the future land use map would be adopted. In staff's opinion, subsection D of the ordinance addresses any adoption or amendment or revision to the comprehensive plan, whether it's through council creation in subsection A or a citizen application in subsection D. If that is unclear, there's certainly ways to amend the ordinance or amend the ordinance to make that clear if you'd like. Commissioner Reynolds had two questions. One related to the who may request a change to the future land use and character map. In the ordinance, it is it's not expressly stated who may apply, but all applications through the Community Development Department require the property owner's consent, and that could be either property owner or in certain cases, a lien holder or a mortgage holder would also be required to provide their consent of such an application. Second part of Commissioner Reynolds' question was related to the term morals used in the proposed language, and where did the word morals come from? We had 4 citizen comments through the survey that we did previous to as part of public outreach for this. One of the citizens asked, whose morals are these and what does the term morals mean? And we could trace that. The Littleton City Code has several references to morals currently in the Littleton City Code, most of them related to licensing. There is no mention of the term morals in the charter, but it traces back to the Colorado Revised Statutes, in particular, the Colorado Revised Statutes for powers and functions of cities and towns, and also specifically zoning. The term morals is used in both of those, but if the commission wishes, that could be stricken from the proposed language without, in staff's opinion, a great effect upon the legislation, if that's your desire. So those were the questions and responses.
And then just one other question. It looked like the city had put out a poll or survey. Looks like that was done on September 4th, and that I guess comments were closed today. Did we receive any additional comments? It sounds like we got 4 people respond.
I believe we had 5
Okay.
5 responses, I think.
5, yeah.
Yeah, I think it was 5 responses. I may have misspoke earlier. I apologize. But I am unaware of any additional responses as of the time of this meeting. But we'll double check before it proceeds to city council.
Typically, when you get a response after you put out emails, you hand out to everyone a piece of paper with the comments. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Which is good to do at the last minute, yeah.
Yeah.
No further
Anything else? Greg?
Yeah, this seems pretty straightforward. I don't have any questions at this point.
David?
I don't have any questions at this time either.
Fire.
All right, sure. Just one question about the public notice required in C1. It references 10-1-9C2 as the type of notice. Just wanting to confirm that that's like notice in the paper of record as opposed to, say, posting the property or mailing to everyone in Littleton.
Commissioner Reynolds, that's correct. We do not do a mailing or posting for these, but we do a newspaper notice.
All right, thank you.
No, I think the questions that have been communicated are appropriate, and I don't have anything extra.
Rob?
A couple questions. So in section A, you talk about the possibility of including areas outside its boundaries, and I was curious how that would apply.
Yes, so that is typical of a lot of jurisdictions that comprehensive plan efforts may not necessarily be confined to the municipal boundaries and can extend outside of the boundaries because there are certain issues that may not necessarily have boundaries associated with them, such as homelessness or things like that, or also, when you're in direct proximity to the jurisdictional boundary, certain land use issues can affect the municipality that's developing the comprehensive plan. So it's not unusual to have planning areas outside of the jurisdiction. I don't believe that in our current comprehensive plan effort that we're showing any areas outside of the jurisdiction, although we do participate in regional efforts and things like that.
So this reminds me, like in the Bellevue Vision, there was places where Inglewood was brought in showing our desires, even though, of course, it's outside of Littleton.
That's correct. That's a perfect example. Thank you.
And then in D, where you talk about an applicant, is there any place where it's defined? I'm concerned that a citizen wouldn't recognize their power to be an applicant in this particular instance, where it just says an applicant.
I don't think we have applicant defined. Let me double check that. Give me a moment. I don't think we have applicant defined, but I'll double check.
And while he's looking at that, I will also just throw in terms of those locations outside the city's boundaries, all cities are required to have a 3-mile plan in terms of potential annexation. So there's always going to be areas that, in this part could even be in Inglewood or other unincorporated parts that the city has kind of designated in sometimes future land uses just in a surrounding area around its jurisdiction.
Thank you.
And we do not have a definition for applicant listed in the definitions section of Title 10, which would govern that entire title. So an applicant could be a developer, or it could be a trust or an individual property owner. But in any case, the property owner needs to give consent to whoever the applicant is.
So is this a normal term? I'm thinking as a citizen, if I read that, I wouldn't recognize that I had a right to do that here. And my only concern is if a citizen does want to do something like this, they'd have no idea because the term applicant is so vague. Maybe, is this a common use where the applicant can also mean a citizen in this sense?
I think, in my opinion, it probably should be more well-defined in terms of at least people being able to understand who it is that can change the designation of a future land use. Can it be someone outside the city? Could it be someone who's actually not the property owner? So those things, I think you're on the right track in terms of maybe wanting to drill down and get some more clarification as to who applicant might be. Can they affect the future land designation of a property they don't own? Is that the intent that the city has? And I guess I'll defer back to Mr. Sutherland in terms of what the intent is, and then perhaps we can see if there's some sort of amendment we could make to that language to make sure it's very clear for those persons seeking to make that change as to what their standing would need to be.
I would definitely like to see an amendment as such worked out between how you guys feel it would be best said.
Certainly, and Mr. Betsing and Commissioner Schwartzbacher, you make a great point. I think the intent of that section, if I can articulate it, is that occasionally there's a property that may be held by a property owner who is either in state or out of state. Could be a local resident, or it could be, somebody from out of state that owns a particular property. They might be in contract to sell that property to a developer. If the developer and the sale of the property may be contingent upon the success of an application. So part of that application might be a change to the future land use map. Let's say the future land use map says that one particular property that they're in contract to buy should be a residential property, and they want to change it to a commercial property, for example. Then they would apply, the developer, the potential developer of the property could be an applicant that does not own the property. They would have to have the consent of the property owner to make this application, and they would apply to change the future land use map from a residential zoning to a commercial zoning. That may be a contingency of the sale of the property in order to get the developer comfortable enough to purchase that their plans for the property have sufficient backing to go ahead with a purchase. So there's all sorts of complicated circumstances out there where an applicant may not necessarily be the property owner, but always the property owner would need to give their consent to the application. And that is standard for any development application that goes before staff or the Planning Commission or City Council.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Michael, can I just ask for clarification on that, if I may? I think you mentioned that the hypothetical developer in this case could ask for a change of the future land use map, but I think you mentioned that it could change the zoning. They're two different things, right?
Two very different things. Okay. Yeah, and let's assume that in order to one of the criteria for a rezoning, let's say, is consistency with the comprehensive plan. Yet we have through unforeseen circumstances, we have a future land use map that identifies this in a different way. That could be a case where they would want to amend the future land use map before they do the rezoning application to make sure that the two documents are consistent.
But that doesn't necessarily mean that the rezoning would be approved.
Correct. And these developer, citizen, property owner applications are restricted to just that area of the comprehensive plan, just the future land use map. They wouldn't be able to make an application to change a policy or things like that. That would be the purview of the city council.
just to follow up a little bit about what you said, what we have in front of us is a future land use map, not a zoning map. Zoning map and the zoning code is phase 2. Supposedly that will happen this next year if and when the comprehensive plan is approved.
That is
So
the plan.
two different items.
Yes, correct.
Just want to just delve a little bit more into the land use map, future land use map amendments. It's nice, I think it's a very nice tool to have the map amended from time to time. If somebody finds an error, there's no such thing as a perfect land use map. You cannot cover every little piece in the city. There were going to be errors. Question is this tool used in other municipalities? I've seen some that are, it seems like the land use map is written in stone. Is this the case now with most municipalities for their land use maps?
Well, there's one of two ways to go. There's,
Let's hear it.
some municipalities will allow changes to the future land use map, and any zoning decision has to be consistent with the comprehensive plan. Other municipalities will adopt a future land use map and use it as a guideline. And zoning applications will come in. They may be consistent with the future land use map, or they may not. And the Planning Commission and the City Council will weigh that in their determination of what recommendation to make and finally what action to take. So, yes, Chairman Rudnicki, there are some municipalities that expect the future land use map to be amended so that it's consistent. Other municipalities, well, it's a guideline document. We use that as a guide, and we're not necessarily bound to act in literal consistency with that land use map. This, I think, this provision that's in the proposed ordinance assumes that the land use map should be adjusted from time to time, and citizens have, and it's a good fail-safe. As you pointed out earlier, we may not reach every citizen. We may not identify each parcel correctly for the next 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. Things change. This is a way for individual property owners or individual people who are interested in developing property to make an amendment to the comprehensive plan.
Just as an illustration of errors that can be made, the first draft of the future land use map had a couple of errors. One that was called residential when it was actually looked like a office condo. A couple other items, one along Broadway that shouldn't have been what it was called out to be. So, I mean, it's a living, let's call it the living document. How do we want to handle the definition of property owner? Do we leave it to be ironed out down the road? I don't know if an amendment here would be appropriate because of all the ins and outs of how do you define it.
Not to wordsmith for the commission without the request, but it could be as simple as taking that last provision in subsection D, which states that an applicant for a comprehensive plan, future character and land use map amendment, and this is where I would propose inserting this terms, with the consent of the property owner or owners, and then the remaining language shall pay an application fee in an amount to be established by city council resolution. I'm looking at Mike and he's looking at me like.
We'd have no objection to that for the community development department.
So you said with consent of the property owner or owners. Is that the addition?
That would be my suggestion, in case the future land use amendment encompasses more than one parcel that may have different owners.
I apologize, where did you insert it?
After the word amendment, so right in the middle,
Map amendment.
to make it as clunky as possible.
Got it?
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions of staff?
I actually have a line of questioning. You mentioned that some municipalities desire to amend the land use map to be consistent. And what would it be consistent? What would the amendment seek to be consistent with?
So
Once it's adopted.
yeah, it's a great question, Commissioner Bolt. So the zoning should be consistent with the future land use map. And there are circumstances where, the future land use map would would guide the city on future development of an area of the city. And in those cases, you would look for the land use map to sort of guide the zoning decision. But an applicant could say, well, I would like to rezone a parcel. It's a little different than the city's vision, so I want to make an amendment to the land use map first, and try and get that through the city process and get that approved, and then come in with their zoning application and say, well, now it's consistent, we're okay. Really, the future land use map should drive zoning decisions rather than the other way around, where zoning decisions drive the future land use map. Ideally, you'd want it so that the future land use map is the driver and zoning follows.
Right. So that kind of gets to my question on amending the land use map first, and which kind of makes sense. You want to, and presumably people have to agree that, yeah, we want to amend the land use map. That makes sense. We'll do that. And then they want to go for a zoning change, but then the zoning change doesn't go through. So then we've got a land use map that's inconsistent with zoning because the zoning change failed. Do we then have to go back and re-amend the map, or can we have something in there that says, oh, it reverts back if the zoning doesn't change?
These are all sort of areas to be
Yeah,
explored.
I'm kind of getting ahead, I feel like.
Yeah, and
Where's the
Littleton,
test case?
we haven't had a future land use map to kind of answer these questions with. So it's an area that we've got to explore as we move forward. It is possible that, hey, there are two different types of discussion. The future land use of an area, maybe the adopted one, the adopted future land use map didn't anticipate a certain circumstance, and we'd want to change over time. We'd want to change that specific area. And if that's the case, it doesn't mean that zoning needs to, a zoning case comes through for some sort of plan development or something, you can say, well, no, that zoning case for different reasons doesn't pass muster and fails. It doesn't mean that land use map decision of, hey, this should be a commercial area or something like that, doesn't mean that doesn't have merit. So there really are kind of this conversation between how the city wants to grow in the future and then the specific zoning change they're very different conversations. You know, this is the land use map is the thrust of where we'd like to go in the future. And zoning is a particular document that sets up development parameters right now as soon as it's adopted. So, we'll have to kind of ferret that out as we move forward.
Yeah, so presumably Planning Commission, City Council, they're kind of the gatekeepers to the land use map. And I mean, while anybody can come with an amendment, it has to kind of have merit for the overall desires of the community in order for it to move forward, I would assume. That's what we're thinking anyway.
Right. That's how I'd anticipate it too. I wouldn't say I wouldn't say necessarily gatekeepers, but those decisions about the future land use map are important enough that they would require the Planning Commission's recommendation and council's approval. And similar to zoning, zoning is important enough where it requires those as well.
Yeah, I just see the land use map as more of a broader stroke. Whereas zoning is specific to one parcel. But and yeah, I guess by the use of the term gatekeeper, I mean I can just see, not that this would happen, and again maybe I'm getting a little putting the cart before the horse, but I can just see all these changes being made to the land use map in anticipation of zoning that never happens, and then we've got a mishmash of different things going on that and it just becomes a mess. But I'm hoping that doesn't happen.
You can lean on your staff to make sure it doesn't become a mess. We'll try and avoid that.
That's what I was looking for.
I think it's in our charter. We don't do mishmash, so, yeah, so you forgot to read that section. Okay. As usual, I've forgotten you, Sherry. Do you have any questions of staff?
Comments and questions. On B, there were several comments in the 4 responses that we got for surveys regarding language in B, and one was addressed, which is morals. And I had circled that word because I did question where that came from. I don't have a problem with morals in general, but wondered where that language related to. But also, there were comments around the adequate provision of traffic and the adequate provision of air, and I think I saw the word in here several times, adequate provision of public utilities. And so I wondered, is that language also coming from the revised statutes, and is that the standard that we have as Planning Commission is adequate?
And I can, Mr. Betzing may have some comments on this, but yeah, the type of language, air, light, traffic provisions, very common in municipal codes around the Front Range across the state, and also within the Colorado Revised Statutes. Adequate is probably intentionally designed to give a certain amount of discretion to citizen boards and elected officials to determine what is the nature of adequate. And I think it grants you some broad discretion in those regards, which I think is appropriate for the case of a comprehensive plan. And Mr. Betzing, did you have any additions to that, or?
No, I'm going to hide over here, but I believe you're correct, Mr. Sutherland. A lot of this language comes directly from state statutes.
Okay, thank you.
State statutes include the promotion of healthful and convenient distribution of population. Not sure what convenient, as somebody mentioned in their citizen comments, what the hell is convenient? Could you kind of, what's going on with that paragraph?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I think all of this is designed for broad discretion. And it's not that we have a king or anything who gets to determine that in their sole authority. We have citizen groups, and we have, the democratic process to help us determine what that means as in a case-by-case basis as things move forward. And I think that's exactly what it's designed to do. That we don't have a definition for exactly what adequate is on purpose. And we don't have a definition for some of these squishier terms, for lack of a better word, on purpose, so that you can look at a case of its own merits and decide.
Any other questions of staff? Seeing none, we'll go to public comment. Pam, you signed up to speak. Again, you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Chair, can you actually open the public hearing with the time, please? Since it's a public hearing, we need to have it opened at a specific time.
At 7:12,
Thank
opening
you.
up the public hearing.
Good evening again, Planning Commission. My name is Pam Chapburn. I live a block and a half from here. So I don't understand this. The alternative is, if council doesn't amend this code, that may cause some confusion about future adoption of a comp plan and amendments. Where's the harm? Where's the harm been for the past 2 decades? I don't see the need for this, and I'm concerned about what it may lock us into. That I already don't believe that the future land use map represents the best interests of many, many citizens or people who live in this city. If this is enacted, it seems to make what's enacted more fixed. And actually, I'm struck by the discussion. Boy, what can we do for developers and property owners? And where is your interest in the disenfranchised, the marginalized, the people who do not have access to you regularly? And where is their ability to influence these things? They're the ones who are the most impacted by your decisions. They have not the money to deal with the things that cause them to have to move, or transportation changes, all of which are in these documents. They're the ones most impacted, and they have the least access to you and the least influence and the least notice. So I noticed in the comment that applicants get to apply. We do have a limited requirement for notice of rezonings to within a certain distance, but it's only to property owners again. Where is the requirement in here for notice to everyone around there for these kind of applications to the future land use map? The preference here for the owners and the people who already have power and control is appalling to me. And the thing of one public hearing, I mean, I'm sorry, any one of you should think that there should be much more public process specifically called out for changes to the comp plan, even if it's a cleanup. This gives too much power to Planning Commission and City Council and not enough protection to regular citizens. Please think of those people who are living in the Northeast Quadrant and are already finding places that they can barely afford with transportation. They are the first people who you should hear from, who should hear about this and have input, and I don't think they do. So I'm going to ask you to recognize and think of them, and we don't need this, I don't think, and I don't see the harm if it's not passed. Thanks.
Thank you. Since there's no one else here, we'll close the public speaking portion at 7:16. Any last comments or questions to staff? Seeing none, we'll entertain a motion, and we'll probably get to some amendments here. Motion man?
I move to approve Planning Commission Resolution 09-2019, which forwards a recommendation of approval to City Council to amend the Littleton City Code, Title 10, Chapter 1, to establish enabling legislation for the creation, adoption, and amendment of a comprehensive plan.
We have a second?
I'll second.
David is a second. Comment, amendments?
I would like to make an amendment. I move to amend subsection D. Do you want me to read it out with the amendment in there? Comprehensive Plan Future Character and Land Use Map Amendments. An applicant for a comprehensive plan, future character, and land use man amendment with map amendment with consent of the property owner or owners shall pay an application fee in an amount to the established by the city council resolution.
Second.
We'll do one amendment at a time here and vote on it so they don't stack up, okay? Any discussion on the amendment?
Just one thing that occurred to me during the discussion is a hypothetical where, say, an entire block, a neighborhood organization is interested in making an amendment to the land use map, and you get 19 of 20 signatures from the property owners on that, which seems like overwhelming support to change the land use map, but under the proposal and even under the language as drafted, that would fail the test of being able to apply. So you have overwhelming support in a neighborhood, yet no way to make something happen other than perhaps applying pressure to your city council member and encouraging them to take up the banner. And I suppose under the current situation, that's how it is. You would have to petition a city council member to take action on behalf of your neighborhood organization. So just one mild concern with not saying something like a majority of the property owners within the amendment area. But I'm also hesitant to be, tweaking the language that much.
Well, I assume a neighborhood association, let's say, or an historic district, or say Aberdeen Village Association that we belong to, could designate a individual property owner to make the application. They have standing to make that application. And then during the hearing, the neighborhood or the association could come in and argue the case as a block.
It's a little awkward because the one person would own a single piece of property and yet be requesting something that changes, say, 200 pieces of property. But
well, it doesn't say that it's good for one piece or an area. I suppose. Yeah, there's probably another 20 or 30 of these little nuanced items that could clog this up forever.
Yes, it's imperfect, but I wanted to mention the quibble that I
Okay. Quibble noted. Any other comments? Vote on the amendment.
The vote on the amendment is 6 in favor, with Commissioner Bolt voting no. The amendment carries.
Next amendment, if any. Anyone? Well, I guess I'm doing it. Go back to here. Let's see, subsection B, purpose, strike the word morals. That's it. Discussion?
I'll second that so that we can discuss it.
Thank you. Dangling. Any discussion now? Go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to, I think it was suggested by the citizen who participated in the survey, but I like the idea of using this opportunity to add some descriptions that I think are more up to date, like livability, resilience, and transportation options into that. That's a thought, might be by another amendment, but I would be in favor otherwise of striking the word per the motion.
Well, my thought when I was reading this was it was just trying to cover too much. It should have been kept half the size of it is now. It doesn't need to cover everything in order to serve its purpose.
I suppose transportation options is covered under A anyway, but livability and resilience, I think, are two elements we have an opportunity to add. I'll make that a separate motion.
All right, we have a motion and a second.
If I can make a comment,
Of course.
Yes.
You haven't voted yet.
I have not. For morals, it has been very common for communities to include morals for a very long time. I think perhaps sometimes we put a judgment on the word that it seems appropriate, but is usually not in a manner here. When you consider any kind of law you're making, it's making a moral statement. It is, whether you make it a speed limit, that's a moral statement. So I do not have a problem with the word morals because it's the community deciding what's right and wrong for them. And that is usually done through councils and ordinances as such. So I do not have a problem with it at all.
Any other comments?
And I just like the idea of carrying forward the language that's in the Colorado Revised Statute, so I'll be voting against this motion I seconded.
Okay.
I kind of agree with Robin as well, that there are underlying fundamental precepts that we're operating with, and I think they may be hard to define, or each individual may view them with their own lenses or prisms, but I think they're maybe still important to talk about. So.
There are important morals that you mentioned. There are also government dictation of what morality is. They can get carried away. I do believe I'm going to be at the short end of a 6-1 vote here. Any other comments? Please vote.
Could you read the amendment again, please?
Oh, let's see. Subsection B, purpose, strike the word morals.
Thank you.
As predicted.
The vote is 1 in favor with Commissioners Reynolds, Stallman, Schwartzbacher, Bolt, Coronado, and Miller voting no. The motion fails.
And I'm not unhappy about it. Thank you. Good reasoning, by the way. Next amendment? Anyone?
Well, after thinking about it and listening to the conversation, I think it is wordy enough as it is that we don't really need to add any more. So I'm not going to not make a motion to add any words there.
I won't make an amendment. I was noodling on the sustainability issue, but I think in B, subsection B, we've got promotion of safety from fire, flood, other dangers, adequate provision for light, air, promotion of healthful and convenient distribution of population. We talked about that, so forth and so on. And so I think there's certainly elements, as Craig was talking about, as far as the verbiage is concerned, that it gets, that concept comes across. So I'm good with it.
Any other amendments?
And I'll just chime in on that point. I did find the section, it's 3123-207, which talks about the purpose in these municipal comprehensive plan. It actually says shall, so the state statute requires the municipalities to at least address these, so that's where this language is coming from.
And if I could real quick, we've had a request for you to speak up a little bit. Some of you are a little hard to hear, so if you could move in a little closer. Thank you.
Yeah, the acoustics in here are still lacking someday. Any other amendments? I don't see any. Nobody eagerly raising their hand, so we'll vote on the main motion.
As amended.
As amended, thank you.
You want to reread just maybe reread it?
reread the amendments, or?
No, the motion as amended.
I got to get it on the screen. Do you have it convenient?
I did, but I don't now.
I don't. I'll have to go search for it. Here we go. Okay. I move to approve PC Resolution 09-2019, which forwards a recommendation of approval to City Council to amend the Littleton Code Title 10, Chapter 1, to establish enabling legislation for the creation, adoption, and amendment of a comprehensive plan. That's the motion, along with the, one amendment. As amended. Any other questions? Time to vote.
The vote is 7 in favor. The motion carries unanimously.
Okay. Next up is, our Community Development Director isn't here tonight. Any staff comments?
Yes, so we've got a study session tomorrow, a joint study session with City Council to discuss the Transportation Master Plan and the, I keep wanting to say economic plan, but I don't think that's quite right. The
Fiscal impacts, basically.
Thank you, fiscal impact analysis. And hopefully you'll be able to attend those. Those are usually great sessions. So that was all I had.
Any commissioner comments?
I'll just say I can't make it tomorrow evening, unfortunately. I'd love to, but if I have any comments, can I forward them beforehand or based on the presentation that's on the agenda?
Absolutely. You can forward those to either myself or Jennifer Henninger or either one of us, and we'll get those to City Council.
Okay.
Thank you.
I was going to mention the tomorrow's meeting, joint session. Wednesday is the last meeting, last of 6 meetings of the Citizen Coordinating Committee. We've had some very lively sessions. We were the committee that instigated the breaking up of the group into smaller tables, which has worked out very well the last 2 times in our study sessions with council. Thursday is the final speaker in the series, titled "Love Where You Live," so which should be interesting. That's on Thursday at ACC. I guess the main conference hall or whatever at ACC. That's on Thursday. That's all I have. Anything else? We are adjourned.